Hello, Hamish here from mortgagesonline.co.nz. I've got an economist with me today. I managed to find him on the street, Ed McKnight.
Yes, g'day Hamish, how you
He's
doing?
from a crowd called Opes Partners, and they go around trying to, they do make people richer through property. And what we're going to talk about today is growth versus yield. Well, not versus, but just an understanding of growth and yield, right? And different areas, because Ed has a lot of data. Right, Ed? You love data.
I love it. A baker has bread, economists have data. So essentially we really have this dichotomy in property investment about different growth and yield property. So growth property, one that tends to go up in value over time, perhaps doesn't get as much yield in terms of rental yield, and then what would say yield properties where they don't go up in value as quickly, but they make a decent amount of money week to week.
Yep.
Now, over the last 18 years, the slowest growing suburb in New Zealand has been Wellington Central, going up at about 4.5% a year, which sounds crazy, right? But the reason why Wellington Central has appreciated at a slower rate is because it's full of apartments, and apartments have not as much land for each one of them, and that's really where a lot of the value comes from. So, but Wellington apartments make great rental yield because you have a lot of people coming in from government, you've got residents who like living in apartments, and you get actually really high yield rates, so they can make you money if you are looking for yield.
Yep.
Now, growth properties might be something like in Auckland. Now, they might go up at, say, 7 or 8% in Auckland property, but you have a really poor yield, might be about 4%.
Or 3%.
Yeah, some may be 3%, and in which case you may be negatively geared in that situation and be putting money into that property each week. Now that's fine as long as you're aware that what you're really trying to do there is to get that higher growth rate over time.
And I think, look, this is another interesting conversation that I do have with a lot of people is around renter areas versus owner-occupier areas, right? And I think that's kind of follows along with your growth yield story a little bit as well, apart from the property type, is that you tend to have better yield in areas where people don't own their own homes.
Yeah, a great example of this is Wanganui. So Wanganui gets great yield. About 7.1% is what the Real Estate Institute comes out with based on their figures. And within that, you'll see that the reason for that is there are a lot of renters in Wanganui. It's a lower socio-economic area. Not as many people own their own homes. And that's one of the reasons why you'll get really great rental yield there. If you buy one property in Wanganui versus one property in Auckland, though, you'll get a much higher amount of wealth created in the Auckland property, not just because you're buying a higher priced property, but also you'll get a higher capital growth rate over time.
And I guess, the other thing is that sometimes it's probably, obviously the ideal situation is to go for something that is a great yielding property today, but turns into a growth area, which has happened in Auckland, right, in certain suburbs.
You can get that if you buy right and if you have a really, really accurate crystal ball.
Well, there is another way, Ed, that I like to talk about, and that's sometimes if you spread your risk. So if you scatter it around a bit into multiple properties, you have a higher chance that one of those renter areas turns into an owner-occupier areas. You know?
Yes, and I think this is where the key thing about property investment is you don't just have to buy one property.
Yeah.
You should build a portfolio. So even if you have lots of growth properties, and some of those might be negatively geared, some of those might be positively geared, you could then go and buy some high-yielding properties that then can offset the cost that you're putting in towards those negatively geared growth properties that don't get as high a yield over time.
Well, look, thank you for coming in and sharing your thoughts with us, Ed. Hopefully that has been insightful for you, and have a good weekend or evening, whatever time it is when you're watching this.